September 13th, 1987. Goiânia, Brazil. A 6-year-old girl named Lady das Neves sits at her family's kitchen table, eating a sandwich with hands that glow blue in the darkness. She has no idea that she has just sealed her own death. Somewhere in her small body, 19 grams of Cesium-137, a radioactive salt more deadly than cyanide, is already destroying her from the inside out. And she is not alone. An invisible enemy has escaped into the streets of this Brazilian city. Within 2 weeks, it will contaminate 250 people, force the demolition of entire buildings, and create a nightmare that experts will call the worst radiological accident in the Western Hemisphere. Today we are going to reconstruct the forgotten tragedy of Goiânia, Brazil's own Chernobyl. A disaster that began not with a nuclear reactor, but with 2 scavengers, a crowbar, and a mysterious machine glowing in the dark. This is the story of how human curiosity became a death sentence. The Instituto Goiano de Radioterapia had been abandoned for 2 years. Once a private cancer treatment clinic in downtown Goiânia, it now stood as a crumbling monument to legal disputes and bureaucratic neglect. Weeds pushed through cracked tile floors, rain seeped through holes in the ceiling, and in a room that nobody remembered to secure, a 600-kilogram machine sat waiting. On September 13th, 1987, 2 men named Roberto dos Santos Alves and Wagner Mota Pereira saw opportunity in those ruins. They were scavengers, catadores, men who survived by stripping abandoned buildings of anything valuable: copper wire, lead pipes, scrap metal. They had heard rumors about medical equipment inside. What they found was a rotating head assembly from a teletherapy unit, a massive device once used to bombard tumors with gamma radiation. At its core was a small stainless steel capsule, roughly the size of a coffee cup, containing 93 grams of cesium-137 chloride. The men had no idea what cesium was. They only knew the machine was heavy, which meant it was valuable. They loaded it onto a wheelbarrow and took it home. Within hours, both men began vomiting. Their skin started to burn in places where they had touched the device, but they assumed it was something they ate, something minor. They had no concept of the invisible fire they had just unleashed. 5 days later, the capsule arrived at the junkyard of Dever Alves Ferreira. Dever was a scrap dealer, a businessman with an eye for valuable materials. When his workers presented him with the strange metal cylinder they had extracted from the machine, he was intrigued. That night, September 18th, Dever took the capsule into a dark room of his house. And when he punctured its protective casing with a screwdriver, he witnessed something that would haunt him until his death. A blue glow, ethereal, pulsing, unlike anything he had ever seen. The cesium chloride inside was emitting Cherenkov radiation, a phenomenon that occurs when charged particles move faster than light through a medium. To Dever, it looked like magic, like something supernatural. He called his family to see. His wife Gabriela, his brother Ivo, neighbors, friends. Word spread through the community about the beautiful glowing powder at Dever's junkyard. People came to see, to touch, to take pieces home as souvenirs. Children rubbed it on their skin like carnival glitter, delighted by how they sparkled in the dark. Gabriela Ferreira placed some on her forehead, not knowing she was painting herself with death. 6-year-old Lady Eva's daughter played with the blue dust while eating her sandwich. No one felt the gamma rays tearing through their cells. No one heard the silent destruction of their bone marrow. The cesium was spreading across the city in pockets, in purses, on hands that touched doorknobs and dinner plates. But what was killing them felt like nothing at all. The symptoms began within hours. Nausea, vomiting, diarrhea, dizziness so severe that victims could not stand. Then came the burns, angry red welts that appeared on skin that had never touched flame. Dozens of people flooded local hospitals and clinics over the following days. Doctors were baffled. The burns looked like thermal injuries, but patients insisted they had not been near fire. Some physicians diagnosed it as a tropical skin disease. Others suspected an allergic reaction to something in the food supply. No one, not a single medical professional in Goiânia, considered radiation. Why would they? There were no nuclear plants nearby, no obvious source of radioactive material. The idea seemed absurd. But Gabriela Ferreira was growing suspicious. Her husband was violently ill. Her niece was deteriorating. And all of it had started after that glowing powder arrived. On September 28th, 15 days after the capsule was first removed from the clinic, she did something extraordinary. She gathered the remains of the cesium source in a plastic bag, boarded a public bus, and carried it across the city to a public health clinic. She placed the bag on a doctor's desk and said words that would change everything. She said the powder was killing her family. The doctor, terrified by her conviction, called a medical physicist named Walter Ferreira. When Walter arrived with a scintillation detector borrowed from a friend, he expected to find nothing. Instead, his equipment registered radiation levels so extreme that he initially believed it was broken. September 29, 1987. The Brazilian National Nuclear Energy Commission received an emergency call that would mobilize the largest radiological response in the nation's history. Within hours, CNAA technicians arrived in Goiânia with industrial-grade Geiger counters. What they found was beyond their worst projections. The counters did not beep. They screamed. Radiation was everywhere, in homes, in streets, in a junkyard that registered 1,000 times the safe exposure limit. Cesium-137 had spread across 44 square blocks of the city. The authorities faced an impossible task. They had to locate and decontaminate every grain of radioactive material that had scattered across a metropolitan area of over 1 million people. They had to identify everyone who had been exposed, and there was no way to know who had touched the powder, who had visited De Vere's junkyard, who had hugged a contaminated friend. The Estadio Olímpico, Goiânia's soccer stadium, was transformed into a screening center. Over the following weeks, 112,000 terrified citizens lined up to be tested. Parents carried children. Elderly neighbors supported each other. The lines stretched for blocks. Of those screened, 250 showed significant contamination. 120 required medical treatment. 20 were hospitalized with acute radiation syndrome. The most critical patients were airlifted to hospitals in Rio de Janeiro and São Paulo, their bodies so radioactive that medical staff had to rotate in shifts to limit their own exposure. The first death came on October 23rd. Lady das Neves Ferreira, the 6-year-old girl who had eaten her sandwich with cesium-dusted hands, died of internal hemorrhaging and organ failure. She had absorbed a dose equivalent to standing at the epicenter of the Hiroshima bomb. Her body was so radioactive that it had to be buried in a special lead-lined coffin, lowered into a concrete vault in a cemetery in Abadia de Goiás, a town 20 kilometers from the city. When the funeral procession arrived, local residents blocked the road. They threw stones at the hearse. They did not want the contaminated dead buried in their soil. 3 more people would die in the following weeks. Gabriela Ferreira, 2 of Dever's employees. Dever himself survived, but the guilt consumed him. He spent the rest of his life, another 7 years, as a pariah. When he finally died of liver cancer in 1994, his body too was sealed in concrete. The cleanup took 6 months. Workers demolished 7 houses, removed topsoil from dozens of properties, and generated 3,400 cubic meters of radioactive waste, all sealed in steel drums and entombed in concrete repositories that will remain dangerous for 300 years. But the contamination that persisted longest was not physical, it was social. People from Goiânia were turned away from hotels. Businesses refused to buy products from the region. License plates from Goiás state were vandalized across Brazil. The survivors, even those who tested clean, were treated as radioactive pariahs, as if tragedy itself were contagious. The Cesium-137 accident in Goiânia was not caused by a nuclear meltdown or a terrorist attack. It was caused by something far more ordinary: abandonment, neglect, the assumption that someone else would handle it. A clinic closed its doors and left a deadly machine behind. Regulators failed to secure it. Scavengers saw only scrap metal. A family saw only beauty in the blue glow. And that is perhaps the cruelest lesson of Goiânia. The most dangerous things in this world do not always announce themselves. They do not always roar or explode. Sometimes they glow softly in the dark, and we reach out to touch them because we cannot resist what we do not understand. Lady das Neves Ferreira was buried in a coffin designed to contain her for eternity. But what cannot be buried is the truth she taught us, that ignorance is not bliss. Ignorance, given enough time and enough curiosity, becomes catastrophe, and by then it is already too late to look away.